Buckle up, folks, because you're along for the ride with the Refresh Boys as we learn to pour our very first epoxy table. And it's not just any pour, it's a deep pour using Ultra Z Poxy Deep Pour Casting Resin. Boy, that really rolls off the tongue. That's a mouthful, and this was a handful. And now you're full of information about deep pour resin and epoxy, because we taught you everything we know, which isn't much, but it's not nothing. So we inherited this set of table legs when we got this studio, and we knew once we took the disgusting plywood off the top, we knew we wanted to see these legs, because who doesn't want to see a good pair of legs? So how best to do that? A glass countertop. But those turned out to be prohibitively expensive. So where did we turn next? Epoxy. That's probably equally, if not more expensive than the glass that we wanted. But that doesn't matter, because this was going to be perfect, and it was going to be exactly what we wanted and the exact shape we wanted. How do we know that? Well, we made the shape ourselves, which means it's totally custom, and it's actually pretty easy to do. These forms from Z Counterform are cut easily on a miter saw, and once you cut the shape that you want, you simply adhere them to your surface using silicone and a few screws. Now you're going to want to make sure that the surface you're adhering them to is slick and non-stick. They recommend melamine, but here we used aluminum that had a plastic cover on it. It was blue and it looked striking. So the next thing you're going to want to make sure you do is create a barrier so that the epoxy that you're pouring does not escape the mold. That happens. We found that out the hard way. So make sure you spend a good amount of time putting a solid bead of silicone around the entire perimeter, the inner perimeter, the inside of the mold. Seal that up fully, and then once everything's cured, give it a dusting of WD-40. This helps the non-stick surface become even more non-stick. We actually recommend dusting the side of the forms as well, just for a little extra security. Now it's time to pour your resin, to mix the epoxy. And for this particular batch, the calculations are simple because there's only 2 components. So for every 2 jugs of resin, you mix in 1 jug of hardener, and that's 3 jugs. It's a 3-jug bucket mix-up. And that's simple, even we can do that. And after that, it's time to stir the concoction together. But you want to stir gently because we're not trying to introduce air bubbles into our mixture. So that's why we don't use a paddle mixer or anything like that. Just old school butter churning technology. And eventually, when the mix is perfectly homogeneous, it's time to pour. And again, pour slowly. These buckets get pretty heavy, so if you can't do it alone, grab a partner. Do it, it's a 2-person job. But we didn't need that because we're strong epoxy pouring machines. And after 4, 5 gallons, I don't remember how many gallons there were. It seemed like 5 gallons. The table was ready to take form. Look, don't just take our amount of epoxy and just make your own table. You got to do the calculations and make sure you get the right amount. But that's how many jugs it took to make our table, to fill that form right to the brim. And that's what you want to do, fill your form. Once the epoxy's been poured into the form, what you'll notice is that even if you do it slowly, there will be some tiny air bubbles. So pay close attention, because this is probably the best part of the whole thing. Take a heat gun or an open flame, a lantern, if you will, and you're going to want to heat those air bubbles until they disappear. Now this part is what gets you that glassy, smooth pond of epoxy. And I'm telling you, this may be the best part. No, this is the best part. You gotta wait. While you wait for the epoxy to set up, you gotta find something to kill the time. So we figured we'd burn a few laps with our new Slidey Boy drifting car. And about 5 days later, you got yourself a rock hard table.
It's ready to go.
So the curing times on these tables can vary. They recommend at least 48 hours, but we figured we'd give it a few extra days just to make sure that it was fully set up, because the last thing that we wanted was a jello-y, half resin, half goo table. So we gave it a few extra days, and after that, it was time to remove the molds. And we did that slowly at first, but then we got really into it and started peeling them off, and this part is incredibly satisfying as well. Now what you'll notice is, as you start peeling the table off underneath, well, you're not really peeling the table off. As soon as you peel your new table off the old table, it looks like you're cracking it, but it's actually just the table separating. Unless, of course, you did crack your table, which would be catastrophic. We didn't, however. However, what we did realize is, after we put the new clear epoxy table on the beautiful legs, we weren't thrilled with how it looked. It looked a little fake. It didn't look right. And after doing some quick searching online, we realized what we were actually after is what's called a honed or an etched glass look. So it's sort of transparent, but it's also a little bit opaque. So we got to work sanding, and the good news is, in order to make it opaque, it just actually means less sanding, but still a lot of sanding. So don't get that twisted. You still have to sand down all the rough spots, and in our case, we had a little bit of lippage on the edge, so we filed that down and then sanded it, starting with a low grit, working your way up to a high grit. And in our case, we didn't need to go any higher than 400 or so. We even actually went way, way higher and then ended up going back because we preferred the look of the 400 grit to the 800 grit that we took it to. So we did a lot of extra sanding, but once you're happy with where it is, grab some polishing paste and polish it up. And this will give it a beautiful patina, a beautiful shine. Locks all your tables beautiful. To be completely honest, we're not even fully sure what the polishing phase did, considering we weren't going for a crystal clear, glassy-like finish. But the point is, all the steps that we took got us here.
It's perfect.
And here is where we wanted to be from the very beginning. So how did we get there? Well, it wasn't the straightest path. It wasn't linear. But it's like the old saying goes, it's not about the journey at all, actually. It's solely about the destination. It's about where you end up. How you get there, it's irrelevant. No one even needs to know. As long as you get where you're going, you're there. That's how that saying goes, right?
I thought it's all about the journey.
Wait, you're saying it's more about the journey than the destination?
Yeah, it's like how much fun do we have getting there?
The opposite of what I said.
Mm-hmm.